This video covers the main points that are in the Introduction to Systematic Review workshop that's aimed at postgraduate students. The purpose of the video is for you to understand why you should carry out a systematic review, to identify the structure of this particular assignment, and to recognise the importance of the process, as well as to find additional sources of support. What the video is not going to touch upon is how to write the literature review, how to use Word when you're writing a long document, planning a search strategy, or use of referencing management software. A systematic review is a specific type of secondary research that's main purpose is to identify, appraise, and synthesize evidence, and that work needs to meet specific criteria in order to answer a research question. You need to employ systematic methods to generate reliable and replicable findings with a small amount of bias as possible. So what is secondary research? Take a moment to decide which of the answers on the screen is correct. You can pause the video while you have a think about it. The answer is A. Secondary research is reviewing of data that's already been collected and analysed previously. Primary research is when the researchers carry out that research themselves. They collect and observe and experience the results themselves. Secondary research is when that primary research is reviewed and then interpreted by a secondary research team. So as you might expect, a systematic review requires a very specific systematic process. And these are the main steps that you need to follow in order to carry one out. You need to create a research protocol. You need to define your research question. You need to search for literature, and in doing so, you need to complete a Prisma chart. You need to select the studies that you're going to include in your review. You need to carry out a quality check of those studies. You then analyse the data and present your results before going on to interpret those results and coming to a conclusion. This diagram kind of follows that process. It kind of helps you visualise that process. You need to clarify the problem of your question before finding the studies, describing the problem and the issue that you're trying to solve, to synthesize the data and then appraise that data for its relevance and quality before interpreting that and then going on to make use of the evidence that you generate. So going through those steps one at a time, the protocol is basically a summary of the methods that you're going to use to carry out your review. So it needs to include a description of the process you're going to follow, the rationale for it, justify why you're carrying out the review, set a hypothesis, describe your methods. All of this needs to happen before you start the review. You need to know about your protocol before you begin, and then use it as a guide to carry out your review. Any official reviews, the protocols must be registered with Prisma, and those are published. So it's a good idea to go to Library search for protocol and systematic review, and you will find a range of published protocol examples. Reading those will help you to understand what's required. You next need to define your research question, and it can be useful to employ a research framework at this stage. We've got some examples on the right-hand side of the screen here. Do pause the video so you can explore this in more detail and choose the one that might relate to your topic within your subject area. At this stage, carry out a scoping search. See what information is out there, what research has been done on this topic already. If your review has already exists, if it's been completed already, you may need to tweak your question slightly. Or if there is very little research evidence out there, you may need to change the scope of what you're doing so that you will find enough literature to review. Once you've defined your question, you can search for the literature. And this needs to be a systematic search. You need to be able to find all the available literature. That's the point of the systematic review. You're going with a fine-tooth comb through all of the available literature. Use Boolean operators and search tools to help you to plan your search strategy. Search databases. Make sure you've decided your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then report your search methodology as part of your method, part of your process. We've got a workshop, Planning Your Search Strategy, that will help you to do this. It might be a good idea to start early with using referencing management software. We can support you using RefWorks, and you can use that to record the literature you've found, and it will help you to manage that as you go forward. When you're reporting the results that you've found, you need to include a Prisma diagram in your write-up. You can download this from the Prisma webpage. There's an example on the right-hand side of the screen here. You need to identify how many studies you found, in which databases, how many records you screened, how many you excluded using your criteria, and sort of suggest the reasons for that, and therefore come up with the number of studies that you are going to actually review. Decide your inclusion and exclusion criteria when you are doing your scoping search, and this can include things like the age of the research, how many participants there are, what the interventions are that are taking place. Then sift them by this process, sift by the title. Some of them will be obvious that they're very on topic and you need to include them. Others will be very obvious that they can be excluded. There'll be some that you can't tell without reading the abstract. Then do a sift by abstract for the remaining papers. And there might be some that you actually have to read the whole article until you know whether it's meeting your criteria. So have a third round by which you sift the remaining articles by reading the whole thing. You also need to carry out a quality assessment, which will involve identifying any bias, whether the outcome measure is appropriate to the study, and whether the intervention is standardised or not. There are a range of quality assessment tools that you can use to help you with this, and I would strongly recommend reading the chapter Quality Assessment, Where Do I Begin? In the book by Bolland, Cherry and Dixon, doing a systematic review that will really help you with this selection process. The next step is analysing the data and then presenting your results. Present the results in tables is the best practice, but give a narrative analysis of the results alongside it. If your studies that you're reviewing are intervention studies, it may be appropriate to carry out a meta-analysis at this stage too. Next, you need to interpret those results and come to a conclusion. Present your main findings. Do they fit with any previously published research? What are their strengths and limitations? Can their results be generalised? And what are the implications of the research that you have reviewed? A really strong tip will be to read examples of published systematic reviews. Go to Library Search and put in inverted commas systematic review. And then when you're looking through them, identify the structure they're using, look at how they've described their protocol and how they've introduced their Prisma diagram, how they write about their search strategy and introduce that and explain how that was carried out. Look at their inclusion and exclusion criteria and maybe note which might be relevant to your review. And then look at how they've presented the analysis and the synthesis of the different research papers. Another tip will be to explore the resources that are available to you. We have a systematic review guide on our webpage. There is a systematic review reading list that you can find the link on that guide. And there are books, journal articles and web pages also linked to the guide that will help you with developing your plan and your protocol. As mentioned right at the start, there are other workshops that will help you. We have one on writing a literature review, planning your search strategy, and managing longer documents in Word.